So today's tutorial will be about multiple UV maps and how to use them. Now this may be a feature you've not even heard of, or it might be a feature you've seen in one of the panels but not really known how to use, or you may have heard people mention them but never seen them put into practice. Today I'm going to show you how to set them up, give you an instance of why you might want to set them up, and then finally show you how to apply them to a texture, both using Cycles and then Blender Internal. And as you'll notice, I've got my little screencast add-on enabled, so you'll be able to follow along any shortcuts I do, just in case I don't tell you what they are. Just drag out a UV image editor window. I'll clear the render result, and then we're just going to do a basic unwrap on this cube. I'm going to hit U and then a Smart UV project and just leave it at the default options. And really this is just to show you two different ways of doing it. You can use any unwrapping and this method still works. So we've done our first unwrapping, and if we go over to the Object Data panel, we see that in the UV Maps panel we've got our UV map which we've just created. Now if I click the plus icon, nothing much has changed apart from a new item has been added to the list and has been named, but nothing has changed over in the UV editor. However, if we press U and then reset the UVs, it resets them in here, and if we switch back to the other one, we'll see our old UVs that were created using Smart UV Project are still preserved here, and then we can switch back to these. Now on this second UV map, I'm just going to select these three faces of the cube and just do a standard project from view, and then just scale them up and put them in the center. And then if I just press Ctrl I to invert the selection to bring up the other faces that I didn't move, I'll then scale them down and just drag them over to a corner because they won't be needed. And if we highlight everything, we can see all the faces in this layout. Now that's how to set them up, but I'm just going to show you a reason why you might want them. And so I have the beer bottle from a previous project, and if I just go into edit mode and then wireframe, you can see the seams I put on it to unwrap it. And if I just select it, you can see it's got a nice neat layout, and I had the label here, the other label here at the bottom, then I had a few strips around the different parts of the bottle. But what I then realised is that I wanted to apply another texture which would affect the reflectiveness of the object and the specularity to give it a condensation look, and this is an effect from one of Andrew Price's tutorials on blenderguru.com. But I realised that this UV map which I'd made didn't allow for that to happen because it would only apply the condensation to specific parts. So I realised I need to unwrap it again, and that's where multiple UV maps come in, because you can see here I have my second UV map called Cylinder, and this is where I just pressed U and did the cylinder projection, and I probably did a bit of correction as well, but it now means I can apply texture to the whole bottle rather than those specific areas. And this is a prime example of where you might need this, and it's where you've got one texture that you want to apply to a specific part, but then you've got another texture which you want to apply to a whole object, and it kind of conflicts with the first way you've unwrapped it. And this luckily means you don't have to then go back and edit this one, you can just make a new one. Just going back to our cube, I'll now actually apply some textures, first in the Blender Internal, and then I'll show you in Cycles how to do it. So I'll just select it, add a new material, doesn't matter what it is, add a new texture, choose Image, and then open the image, and I just have these prepared images just to show you roughly what it is. So I'll select the first one, and under Mapping, I'm going to set it to UV. Now, by default, if there was only one UV map, it would just use that, but because we've got two, we need to tell it which one we want it to use, and I want it to use the first one. Now, because we wanted to use the first one, we could have left it blank, but just to be safe and just to show you how the process works, it's worth changing it. I'll then add another texture. Again, this is going to be an image. I'll open it. This time I'll use the second image. And because it has a transparent background, because these textures are going to be layered, it has this very rough edge, and so I just need to enable pre-multiply to tell it to look for pixels that might be partly transparent. Then I'll go down to the mapping panel again, choose UV, but this time we're going to choose the second UV map. And if I just press 0 to go into camera view and then press F12 to render, you can see that it's used both. The first texture, which just has numbers for each of the faces, is using the first UV map, but the circle, which is using the project from view UV map, is also working, and it's actually acting on top. And this just shows that on one object you can use multiple textures and each can use a different UV map. Now I'll just close this panel, and I'm just going to switch the renderer to cycles, and I will then bring up a new panel for the nodes, and I'll show you how to do a similar thing in cycles. Now I'm not going to show you the whole process, because if you want to learn cycles that's a whole nother tutorial, but I will show you just how to add a different UV map. So I'll go Shift A, texture, image texture, connect that, and then I'll just open up our first texture. Now you can see this vector input, and that's where it gets the UV data from, and by default it will use the first UV map. So if we then did Shift A and then input texture coordinate, it brings up the different options that we can use for texture coordinates, and if we connect UV it will use UV. But there's still no option to choose a different UV map, and so we're actually not going to use the texture coordinate at all. We're going to go Shift A and we're going to input an attribute, and you can see that it's also got the vector output, so we'll connect them up, and it's now looking for a name of something, and so the name of the thing that we need is the name of the UV map we want to use. I'm just going to select our first UV map, hover the cursor over the field, press Ctrl C to copy the name, hover over this field and Ctrl V, and it's now using the first UV map's coordinates. So add the second UV map, we would have another image, so I'll just clear this out, open the second image, we'd connect another one up, but instead of UV map it should now say this name. And you would then merge them together and add them to a shader. Now I'm not going to show you that because, like I said, that's a whole nother tutorial about learning how to use cycles. But using this attribute node is how you select the different UV maps. And I'm not sure if this is a temporary provision or whether this is the official way to do it, but this certainly works. So I'm aware this tutorial might not always be relevant, but definitely for the minute, this is how you select the different UV maps. That's it. I hope you've learnt something, and it can certainly be useful once you put it into practice and start understanding the different ways that it can help you. And yeah, if you have any other tutorial suggestions, as usual, please suggest them in the comments, and I'll hopefully see you in the next tutorial. Goodbye.